Hello everyone, this is David from Automotive Press. I wanted to share with you some really fascinating stories that are coming from Japan because the latest version and editions of the Best Car and Model Magazine X magazines have just been published online. Now, these magazines are only accessible by a Japanese citizen or someone with a Japanese credit card and address. So, fortunately, I have a full access to both of these magazines, and I can share with you some really interesting scoops and rendering. Now, they do eventually reveal some of these online for general publics, maybe about a month later, but for now, you have the latest scoop from these two magazines. So let me show you the Best Car magazine first, and I'll show you some interesting story from the Magazine X version, which is showcasing a new render of the Lexus TX. But first, let's come back to Best Car magazine here. They are perhaps one of the better known magazine for predicting the future of Japanese products. And for example, they had the Land Cruiser 300 rendering done just right. Anyhow, here we are in the Best Car magazine, and they have some really fascinating stories. So this page is not so interesting for North American buyers because it talks about the new Toyota Noah and the Voxy miniature minivans that's coming out any minute. There has been some leaked photos, and they talk about, of course, the Nissan Z and the Lexus LX600. So what they're doing now is highlighting everything that's coming out in 2022. So bear with me as we go through page by page, and I can give you guys more details of the sections that you're interested. So please comment below which of these areas is of most interest for you, and I'll come back and talk about them more in the future. And this page also not as interesting because these are not super new information, and also some of these products are not sold in North America, such as the Suzuki Wagon R and Mitsubishi Light Electric EV. These are not going to be coming to North America. There will be a Mazda MX-30 plug-in hybrid. We already knew that. And then the Nissan X-Trail, which is our Rogue, is something that we already knew about, but there's new versions of that coming up. But it gets a little bit more interesting as we go through the pages. This one is Toyota and Daihatsu Passo. And this is also not sold in North America because these are the mini cars that are very popular in Asia but not obviously available here. They're showing some new compact SUV that is coming out from Honda. Again, most likely too small for us. It's going to use a 1 liter. Here we go, this one here, 1 liter engine, VTEC turbo in fact, and it looks cool, but we won't get this one. And then of course Suzuki have not been selling cars or trucks in North America for many years now, but in Asia they're very popular. And there's a new Escudo, which is a smaller SUV that's coming out. That's their rendering right here. And Honda has a new Step Wagon coming out, which is actually a very popular miniature wagon again, coming out very soon, May of 2022. So now we are getting into much more interesting things because these models will indeed show up in North American market. And we know a lot about the Civic Type R, but this is a new rendering that we haven't quite seen yet. Kind of updated version of the renderings they've done before based on the latest Civic hatchback image, I suppose. It looks really cool, very much understated still, and we already know a lot about this Civic Type R, so I'm not going to get into that right now too much. You already know that it's going to be a 2-liter 4-cylinder VTEC turbo engine with a potential of up to 320 horsepower, give or take, because this is a Japanese horsepower rating. And below the Civic Type R, this section is about our new Civic version, but this one is particularly talking about new hybrid for Civic. They call it EHEV, and that should also become available, hopefully for us here in North America. They're also showing a new Mazda 2, which we probably won't get here. And then in July of 2022, a new Mazda 6. Now this one here, I think I might do a separate video to talk about it because it's a really cool news. But they are, as you've heard before, saying that the new Mazda 6 will be a highest premium sedan they've ever introduced, with this cool design that kind of look like a futuristic Jaguar or Audi A7 look. If it looks anything like this, wow, that is an amazing design. I would buy that. Lots of information about and powertrain. I won't talk about them right now because we have a lot to cover in this particular video. A new Suzuki Swift is also coming. And if you do live in Asia, you know how important the Suzuki Swift is to the Asian market. They're saying this is one of the new models that will come out, including a sports version in 2023. Here we go, more information about GR Corolla, and I'm going to again do a separate video on this one because it merits its own video. And you've seen this rendering before from this magazine, but looks like this one is slightly updated. And so let me talk about that in one of the future videos. And this is something that's going to come out in August of 2022, they're saying. So it's going to be really exciting. This is one important, significant news from Toyota. I'm really looking forward to the GR Corolla coming out. There's also new Toyota Sienta microvan, not sold here. And then we already know a lot about Toyota's electric cars such as BZ4X and the Subaru Solterra. These are things that we've been hearing about already because so much information have been released by Toyota. Here's a new Subaru Impreza and the rendering shown here on the bottom left. Followed by Nissan Selena, which is their compact minivan, because Japanese actually really like minivans and station wagons. Obviously that's not the case here, so we don't get these models. So let's get to the more interesting stuff. Well, there's a Lexus Rz, which we've seen already from the most recent Toyota Lexus BEV or battery electric vehicle presentation. So this photo you've seen as well. And then we already know a lot about the Integra, which is currently not supposed to be sold in Japan. I have done a separate rendering on the Integra, so please take a look. I'll include the link in the description. But it's very exciting news. At the same time, though, we're kind of disappointed it's a 4-door Integra. But who knows, we might get the 2-door version at some point in the future. Okay, now we're getting into more juicy information here. So we got the new Lexus RX rendering here. We have seen this before, but this one again seems a bit more updated version, front and back, looking a lot like the current RX with many of the design elements from the Lexus NX incorporated. Looks actually really good, and definitely looks like a type of design that will sell well in the Lexus market because RX, of course, is a high volume seller. And then we have a new Subaru WRX STI version, which we have been hearing about already, and we know a lot about this model. But moving on to the left side of the page, this is where things get a little bit questionable, but also very interesting, because they are still claiming that in November of 2022, we are going to get the Lexus ISF. That's right, not the IS 500 that we already have, but the full version of the ISF as a highest performing Lexus IS. So they are saying this is still slated for introduction with obviously the 5-liter V8 engine, 2UR GSE engine, with as much as 481 PS, which is a Japanese rating for the horsepower. We've been hearing about this rumor for a while now. I'm still kind of questioning this decision. I don't think that Lexus will introduce the Lexus ISF in addition to IS 500 when the IS 500 is already in a very much a limited model. But you never know. That's what they're claiming anyway. And then the biggest bombshell here, the biggest news is something they have been talking about for a while, which is that they're still claiming Lexus is developing and planning to produce a new twin-turbo 4-liter V8 engine for the flagship Lexus LSF, which is going to be the highest performing Lexus sedan in the lineup. As you know, Lexus officials have been telling us there will be more F Sport variations in the futures, so it's very possible that both ISF and LSF are going to be showing up sometime in the near future. But I'm still hearing from other sources that the 4-liter twin-turbo V8 engine has been canceled in terms of development. So I don't know who to believe right now. I'm kind of leaning toward LSF not happening because of all the focus Lexus and Toyota have on electrification and battery electric vehicles. I can't actually imagine them introducing a 4-liter V8 turbo engine at this point in time. They're saying that it could have as much as 660 PS, or again, Japanese rating for horsepower, and that it'll be a highest performing sedan to ever show up from Lexus. Now let's hope that this news is in fact true and that this is going to happen sometime in the next 2 years. And then there's just a bit of a news on the Toyota Prius, which is going to have a full new version in December of 2022. And so that is going to be kind of cool. Even the Prius isn't as significant as it used to be, this is still the model that kickstarted the whole hybrid situation for Toyota, so it's an important model. And finally, they finish off by talking about Toyota's new future electric vehicle strategy, which I already talked about in my previous video, so I'm not going to cover that right now. But they talk about both Toyota and Lexus products being electrified in the next several years, which is a huge news, as you know. The magazine continues on for many more pages here, but now they're getting into existing products such as car reviews, and in this particular section they're talking about sports cars that they recommend under $40,000. So I'm not going to go through the rest of the magazine, but I'm going to now take you to the Model Magazine X, which is a competitor to this magazine, where we're going to talk about the Lexus TX. Okay, so we are now in Magazine X. This is the February edition, if you can believe that. And this is a direct competitor to the Best Car magazine. And in old days, Magazine X was the gold standard in terms of predicting the future and coming up with renders. But lately, in the last, let's say, several years, the Best Car magazine have become better at predicting the future. But nevertheless, they have some really interesting articles, and there's quite a few pages here, but I want to focus on one particular article, which is this one here, and this is the render they came up with for the Lexus TX. Now this is interesting because the Lexus TX will not be sold in Japan, but yet this magazine have chosen to come up with a render. No, I'm not quite convinced this is a good render yet. So in case you haven't been following up on the story about the Lexus TX, it is supposed to be a 3-row SUV that is based on the Toyota Highlander, to be built in Indiana in the US. And so the Lexus TX is going to be obviously a more premium, higher flagship version of the Highlander with its own distinctive styling inside and out, even though it will be built on the same line as the Highlander, because that's what Toyota usually do to save cost and time and money. Now, I do own a Toyota Highlander 2021, in fact, so I'm very familiar with that model, and it should be a good foundation and a reference point to produce a Lexus TX, because the Highlander is actually really, really well done. I know that everyone talks about Kia Telluride and Hyundai Palisade as benchmark, and indeed those two SUVs have better design and better interior, but driving wise the Highlander is actually beautiful to drive, has a predictable handling and a good solid powertrain. So the Lexus TX should do well because it is based on that solid foundation, which is a TNGA platform, again, to be built alongside the Highlander. And what they've done here is take the Highlander render and added Lexus feel in terms of the grille and the actual badging and the headlight. Again, I'm not quite convinced this is the way it's going to look, but nevertheless, it is the latest rendering that we have seen so far for the Lexus TX. And as previous news have already surfaced, this is supposed to come in TX350 and TX500H format, so gasoline and hybrid. And in terms of powertrain, we don't know exactly what's going to be in the Lexus TX. but at least the hybrid version is expected to be very similar to what's in the Highlander, because that will save the development time. But the gasoline version might migrate to the 2.4 liter turbo 4-cylinder engine that we see in the Lexus NX, or at least that's what a number of sources are predicting. Or it could keep the same engine as a Highlander. We don't know that yet. All we know is that it's going to be about the same size as a Highlander, a proper 3-row SUV with a decent amount of space in the third row, and with upscale features and design elements that you would expect from a Lexus. So this is what they are saying that it might look like. And then they talk about its competitors, such as Infiniti QX60, Cadillac, and even Lincoln. And that's about all they have. They're saying 2023, sometime in that calendar year, which sounds about right. And we will, I'm sure, hear more about this as we get closer and closer to the date. So there are some other articles from Magazine X, but they're not as interesting actually. I didn't find them any newsworthy at this point, so I'm gonna stop right here. Please let me know again in the comments below which of these cars or SUVs that you want to know more about, and I'll create a future video. Again, these are fresh news from Japan. More information to come. Thank you so much for watching. I'm signing off for now. Take care.